Hello and welcome back. We're going to keep talking about the Federal Reserve. So we did part one. We asked ourselves, what is the Fed? And so now we're going to zoom into part two and we're going to answer the question of what does the Fed do? You know what it is. Now, what does it do? So there are four jobs or functions of the Federal Reserve that we're going to look at. There are lots of things that they do, but we're going to kind of distill it down into four things. And you can see them here. The first one is monetary policy. This is the most important job. And it's important to not get this confused with fiscal policy. Remember, fiscal policy is what the Congress of our United States federal government and the President of our United States federal government, it's a little bit of an awkward way to say that, is what those groups do with taxes and spending, paying for things with tax money. That's fiscal policy. They try to encourage a healthy economy with that stuff. Well, the Fed also tries to maintain a healthy economy, and they do it through monetary policy. Now, I'm not going to tell you what that is yet. We'll tell you that later, but suffice to say, it's pretty major, and that's the first thing. Another thing that the Fed does is they're there to act sort of like mom and dad. They're there to supervise regular, normal United States banks. So, for instance, I go to Chase Bank. I know a lot of people use Chase. Some people use Bank of America or Fifth Third or whatever. Consumer Credit Union is big over here. The Federal Reserve keeps an eye on those banks and makes sure that they're behaving themselves, meaning they're making smart loans, they're not stealing from people, they are basically doing what a good bank ought to do and is not going to do anything that will harm its customers or, in a bigger sense, harm the economy. Because if banks do stupid things, the economy can really suffer, and we don't want that. Third thing, the Fed is there to provide what we just call special financial services, which is sort of vague, I know, but some of those services are things like they help checks clear. So when you write a check or your grandma gives you a check for your birthday, I remember when I was a kid, I would get a check for like $5 from my grandma. I would sign the back, and my mom would take it to the bank, and it would somehow miraculously turn into money. Well, that I have the Federal Reserve to thank for that. The Federal Reserve is intensely involved in taking checks, sending them around, and moving money from one bank to another, from my grandma's bank to my mom's bank, and then my mom can withdraw that money as cash and give it to me. That's all thanks to the Fed. And it's incredible how many millions of checks get cleared each day, and oftentimes they never make a mistake. It's really astonishing. So way to go, Federal Reserve. Three cheers for you on that one. The Fed also does other things. They hold bank reserves, which means that your individual bank, like Chase Bank, has to keep a certain amount of money at the Fed. So remember, there are 12 different buildings all across the country. We have one in downtown Chicago. The Chase Bank in Gurnee has to keep a certain amount of its money in the Federal Reserve Bank in downtown Chicago. And that's required, and they do certain things with that, but it's also just there to keep safe, kind of like a bank's bank again. And then the third thing is that the Federal Reserve is the way that we get paper currency into our economy. The United States federal government does the actual printing of currency, like bills, but then they just basically hand it over to the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve then gives it to banks, lends it out, and it eventually will end up in your pocket or your wallet or purse, and you'll probably go spend it at Chipotle. Fourth thing, last job, is that the Fed is there to provide emergency financial support. So when a bank needs money, oftentimes they will borrow from other banks. So Chase Bank might borrow from Fifth Third Bank or BMO. Just to cover everything they need to in a given day or a given week. But sometimes, if banks all across the neighborhood or town don't have enough cash, they can turn to the Fed, and the Fed will swoop in with sacks full of money and make sure they have enough cash on hand to run the bank for that day. They'll also be there to respond to and help fix different catastrophes that might happen in our economy. A great example would be the 2008 financial meltdown. Part of the problem there was that banks were making sort of bad loans, and when they couldn't get their money back from customers, they had to get money from somewhere to keep functioning. And what we saw was that the Federal Reserve decided to swoop in and give money to banks for that kind of a situation. So that's part two. you've heard what the Fed is, and now you've heard what the Fed does. And so when we come back, we will zoom in on part 3 over here, and we will ask ourselves, how does it do monetary policy? This most important function, how do they do that? Okay, thanks a lot, everybody.